Activist back in Hong Kong after ordeal in the capital. Top pro-Beijing figure talks tough over 2017 CE election, and the central government dismantles scandal-plagued railways ministry. Good evening. A local activist has been freed after he was detained by mainland authorities while trying to visit the wife of jailed Nobel laureate Liu Xiaobo in Beijing. Yung Hong is now back in Hong Kong. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying spoke out today about the beating of Hong Kong journalists covering the activist's attempt to visit Liu Xia.
Yung Hong was released earlier today and expelled by the authorities for stirring up trouble in Beijing. He arrived back in the territory just after 8 this evening. He told reporters that he had been beaten up by men in plain clothes just before his arrest. Yung also revealed that he had not been contacted by any Hong Kong officials since he was taken into custody on Friday. After Yung's arrest, no one could get in touch with him. His mobile phone was switched off and police claimed they weren't holding him. Yung also revealed that mainland authorities had indicated they wanted to detain him for 5 days, but they decided to deport him instead. Earlier on Friday, Hong Kong journalists, including a TVB cameraman, were attacked by men in plain clothes when they were covering Yung's attempts to visit Liu Xia, the wife of jailed Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo. Today, 2 days after the incident, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying spoke publicly about the attack. He said Hong Kong journalists who are carrying out lawful and normal news-gathering duties should be respected and protected. The CE said he asked relevant government departments across the border to look into the assault as soon as he heard about it, and the Hong Kong office in Beijing had been following up on the case with mainland authorities. Over the past 2 days, various political groups protested outside the central government's liaison office in Weston to express their anger over the assault and Yung's arrest.
Hong Kong people have been promised a chief executive elected by universal suffrage in 2017, but with suggestions of a preliminary selection process for the candidates, questions are being raised as to how democratic this vote will actually be. More from Diane To.
Preliminary selection is absolutely needed. That was 2 cents from Elsie Leung, Vice Chair of the influential Basic Law Committee. Allaying concerns that Hong Kong won't see its next chief executive voted through universal suffrage, she pointed out that a lot of countries have a pre-selection process, especially in populated places, and Hong Kong has 3 to 4 million eligible voters. She called it presumptuous to suggest it's unreasonable when there are no details out on the pre-selection process yet. National People's Congress Standing Committee member Rita Fan today urged people not to panic. She said a preliminary selection process does not necessarily mean the principle of universal suffrage will be compromised. Fan said people have to be practical. If there were 20 choices to vote for, that would be too chaotic. LegCo President Zhang Yuxing said the government must study the details, how people are nominated, whether it's a democratic process, whether the public can accept it. But he said the nominations must be made by a nomination committee. If you say that's undemocratic, sorry, that's what the Basic Law allows. However, former Chief Secretary Anson Chan said the election should not start off by eliminating people from running for the top job. She said it's Hong Kong's choice and that people won't vote for a leader who can't work with Beijing. The question, she said, is whether the central government trusts Hong Kong people. Chan urged the government to begin public consultation on election reform as soon as possible. Director of the central government's liaison office in Hong Kong, Zhang Xiaoming, said a few days ago that there will be a preliminary selection for the CE election. He also reiterated the hope of the central government to see a chief executive who loves the country and loves Hong Kong, is trusted by Beijing and loved by Hong Kong people. Diane To, TVB News.
Democratic Party lawmaker Albert Ho has spoken out against any vetting of candidates in the 2017 chief executive election. He says pan-democratic candidates were able to join the CE race in the past, no candidates were screened out, and there was no chaos. He calls the introduction of a vetting process unacceptable when the SAR's top leader is to be elected by universal suffrage. Andrew Lau has that story.
In the 2007 chief executive election, aspiring candidates needed the support of at least 100 of the 800 election committee members to be formally nominated. In the end, Ellen Leung of the Civic Party represented the pan-democratic camp to run against the incumbent Donald Tsang. In last year's CE election, the nomination threshold was raised to 150 election committee member support after the body was enlarged to 1,200 members. This time, the Democratic Party's Albert Ho joined the race as the only pan-democratic candidate. Today, Ho told TVB News that it's unnecessary to screen out any candidate in the 2017 CE election. He said, judging from past experience, there will only be about 2 to 3 candidates in the race. Don't tell me we can trust a 1,200-strong election committee, but not the millions of Hong Kong citizens when the chief executive is to be elected by universal suffrage, he said. It will be an insult to Hong Kong people's rights and dignity if Beijing forbids pan-democrats from taking part in future CE elections. Ho said if Beijing decides to screen out any candidate not in its favor, that will be fake universal suffrage, and he will consider resigning his legislative council seat to force a by-election and a de facto referendum on the issue.
Now, how is that different from the 5-district referendum a few years back? Now, your party disagreed with that campaign, but now you're trying to resign and triggering a by-election. How is that different?
Last time, the resignation of 5 legislators to trigger off a de facto referendum is itself the goal, is itself the objective of the movement. Okay, but this time, as I've said, it is part of a bigger plan. And secondly, I think this time we would have a much clearer proposition for the people to vote on.
Ho called on the government to allow adequate time for the public to discuss arrangements for the 2017 CE election by launching a public consultation as early as possible. Andrew Lau, TVB News.
We turn now to a major overhaul announced by the Chinese government. Under a restructuring plan unveiled today, the scandal-plagued Railways Ministry will be dissolved. The overall aim is to fight corruption and reduce red tape. Jameson Wong has more.
The downfall of former Railways Minister Liu Ji-jun and the deadly 2011 high-speed train crash in Wenzhou exposed problems in the Railways Ministry. Its role as both the railway service provider and watchdog has come under increasing scrutiny. Today, under a government restructuring blueprint submitted by the State Council to the National People's Congress, the ministry will be dissolved into separate administrative and commercial arms. Railways Minister Sheng Guangshu said the move will improve service and enable the sector to develop further. He said he doesn't care if he would be the last railways chief, stressing the needs of the country come first. Also, as part of the reshuffle, the Health Ministry will merge with the National Population and Family Planning Commission to form a new National Health and Family Planning Commission. That means population policies will become the responsibility of the National Development and Reform Commission. In a bid to boost food safety, the status of the State Food and Drug Administration will be elevated. The country's top oceanic administration will be revamped to bring its maritime law enforcement forces under the unified management of a single body. The National Energy Administration will be restructured to streamline the way the energy sector is administered and regulated. And there will be a merger of 2 media regulators, the General Administration of Press and Publication and the State Administration of Radio, Film and Television. Overall, the number of ministries under the State Council will go down from 27 to 25. It will be the country's 7th restructuring attempt in the past 3 decades. State Councillor Ma Kai made clear there are still shortcomings in the socialist market economy. There's too much meddling in some areas and there's a lack of monitoring in others. Ma stressed problems such as corruption need to be addressed as the government continues to shift its role from that of a market player to a regulator. Jameson Wong, TVB News.
21 United Nations peacekeepers held by Syrian rebels for 3 days have now been released. The Filipino peacekeepers are part of the UN mission monitoring the ceasefire line between Syria and Israel in the occupied Golan Heights. The rebels escorted them to the Jordanian border where they released them. Their abduction on Wednesday has highlighted the dangers of Syria's civil war spreading across borders in an already volatile and tense region. Next, renewed unrest in Egypt. Protesters torched buildings in the capital Cairo and tried unsuccessfully to disrupt international shipping on the Suez Canal. This follows a controversial court ruling over deadly football violence in Port Said last year. At least 2 people were killed and more than 60 injured in the unrest in Cairo. It was sparked by the ruling that confirmed the death sentences imposed on 21 football fans in Port Said for their role in a stadium riot there that killed more than 70 people. But 28 other defendants, including 7 police officers, were acquitted. Analysts say the violence once again shows President Mohamed Morsi's government is struggling to maintain law and order. The Vatican has confirmed that the process to elect a new pope will begin on Tuesday morning. Although no clear favourites have emerged to lead the 1.2 billion member Catholic Church, the conclave is expected to be wrapped up within a few days. Here's Chris Gelkin.
With preparations moving into top gear, firemen climbed onto the tiled roof of the Sistine Chapel yesterday to complete the installation of a chimney that will signal to the world that a new pope has been elected. On Tuesday afternoon, 115 cardinals will begin a series of secret ballots to determine who among them will succeed the recently retired Benedict XVI. After a special mass and procession, the cardinals will enter the frescoed Sistine Chapel.
And then we'll see the Master of Liturgical Ceremonies come to the doors of the Sistine Chapel and throw everybody else out. Extra omnes. Everybody but the cardinals out of here. We'll see those doors close. No cameras inside.
At the end of each round of voting, the ballot papers are mixed with a chemical to give off white or black smoke. Black smoke signifies no decision, and white smoke announces a new pope will soon be presented to the waiting crowds. The media were allowed into the chapel yesterday to witness the preparations for the conclave. After completion of a fake floor to level out the chapel's pavement, benches, tables and chairs were set up beneath Michelangelo's masterpiece, The Final Judgment. As excitement mounts, church officials and cardinals have only one answer when pressed on who they think will be the next pope.
I don't know. So we have to pray up to God's will.
No conclave has lasted more than 5 days in the past century, with many finishing within 2 or 3 days. Benedict was elected within 24 hours in 2005 after just 4 rounds of voting. Chris Galkin, TVB News.
Tragedy near the German city of Stuttgart today. 8 people from the same family, including 7 children, were killed in an early morning fire that swept through an apartment building. Police say all the victims were of Turkish origin. The youngest one was just 6 months old. 3 others were injured and treated in hospital. German authorities say the blaze broke out in a flat on the 2nd floor and might have something to do with a heater. The building is part of a former leather factory. Turkey's ambassador to Germany has planned to travel to the scene. And over to sports now. Another game, another record for Barcelona's Lionel Messi. Messi came off the bench to score in his 17th straight La Liga match. Polish forward Teodor Putrek registered a goal in 16 consecutive matches in the late 1930s. Messi's strike helped Barca beat bottom club Deportivo La Coruña 2-0. The Argentinian has 40 league goals this season. And now a quick look at the weather before we go. Sunny periods today and temperatures between 18 and 23 degrees. That's all from the newsroom for now. Thanks for joining us and have a very good night.